there's one thing where you choose to go to college, right? And you decide that, okay, well, I'm gonna go to college. I'm going to get one of these useless degrees, as I like to call them. I'm going to say useless degrees, right? Because
Yeah, that's
and
valid.
this is not a shot at anything that you've done, obviously, right? But I'm going to say from a return on investment perspective, they tend to fall on the lower side, right?
Oh, absolutely. And just to that point, I mean, after I graduated, no, even before I graduated, actually, just going to like career fairs where, a bunch of different employers would come. Nobody wanted a linguistics major. Even in my graduating class, there were only like 3 or 4 of us in the whole senior class compared to,
Wow.
an abundance of, accounting majors, abundance of like so many other, business related majors. So I understand in terms of like the return on investment, how that can look. I still wouldn't change it though, but I definitely knew it then, even though I knew, yeah, just thinking back, I remember being at the career fairs and like, um, nobody wanted to talk to me except for like AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, the nonprofits, things like that. But if I were to go to Deloitte or to, a big four accounting firm, they weren't going to talk to me. They would just look at my major and like laugh.
Yeah, and
So,
that's what I find interesting, Ella. That's what I find interesting, right? Because most people in your shoes that I know of that's gotten some of these degrees that are at that bottom level, right? They choose to let that be their ultimate like downfall, right? Where they are in a whole bunch of debt and they just can't figure it out. You have been able to like figure it out based on the transitions that you've had. Obviously, you realize after graduating that maybe this wasn't the right path, right?
mhm.
But you made a transition to finance, and then you made a transition to tech. Talk about what you did after graduating, because I want people to understand, and I want to know a little bit more too, because I think it's absolutely fascinating that your college degree gave you so much exposure to different parts of the world. When I hear this sort of stuff and people get like they take advantage of the other aspects of going to college to study abroad. You went to Jordan, right? You went to Ghana. That's pretty remarkable to be able to say that you've done that while you're in college and to gain that worldly experience, and also coming from a place that you would consider, like you mentioned yourself, you come from an unprivileged background. When you go to places like Jordan or you go to a place like Ghana, you really do potentially see what poor people are living like. And it's a lot different than what the poor in the United States is. Were
Oh,
you
for
able
sure.
to determine that as well too? And how did that like help you with your drive to say, you know what, like I'm not down and out with this degree. There's so many other ways that I can get it. Like how talk about that piece of it. When you figured out that the world is different and we do have a lot of luxuries in the United States. And did that motivate you to make a job transition or a career transition and so forth? Talk about that.
So that's a good question. Let me think about that. I think I was still on the path towards international development, I think, when I was in college. And that's why I actually chose Jordan and Ghana compared to, what most people want to go to, which is like somewhere in Europe. Because I felt like I would get more of a cultural experience. I would get I would understand and recognize my privilege a little bit more, especially when I was in Ghana.
Mm,
Because I remember during that trip or during that semester, we went to this place called Inzulezu, which is like it's called a village on stilts, and
mm,
it's basically like this village that is right directly above water, in this little area in Ghana, and it's, I mean, impoverished like no other. And I had never seen anything like it. We had to actually take like canoes to get there in the first place. So it's very isolated, very, very small village. And I remember at that point, like, I, my privilege was absolutely checked. And this is coming from someone who, in the US context, doesn't feel like they have a ton of privilege, or at least back then I didn't. So it, I don't know if it made me want to pivot then at that moment, but it definitely gave me a broader perspective of what other people are dealing with in the world. And
mm.
so, and it also gave me an appreciation for my life in the US, and also the education that I was receiving, because the university that I had attended in Ghana, it was just a very different type of curriculum, very different type of education system compared to what I was used to growing up. So it gave me more appreciation for the education that I or that I was receiving, even though the ROI or the degree itself wasn't necessarily monetarily that valuable.
Got it. I love that. So tell me this. Tell me this. You graduate, right? You graduate. What was your first job after graduating, or were you able to find a job?
So when I graduated, I actually was accepted into the Peace Corps. Okay. And I departed for Morocco. So before I actually left for Morocco, I participated in a fellowship in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is in Eastern Europe. And that was a fellowship to learn about World War II, or Bosnia post World War II, because I had never learned about the country before. Once again, I was still kind of in that international mindset, nonprofit space. So I was really focused on just learning about cultures, learning about, different things from all over the world. And so Bosnia was the first one. And then Morocco was soon after. I had to come back early from the Peace Corps, though, from Morocco, just for family reasons. So once I got back home, all my plans were kind of shot, because if you don't know about Peace Corps, it's a 2-year commitment. And so when I had to come back to the US, I was just like, okay, well, what do I do with my life now? I had plans to be, abroad for several years, and now I'm back in the US. What do I do? So then I started researching like anything I could find, like what is in demand, who's hiring linguistic majors. And so when I got back, it took me about 9 months to actually find a full-time position after that. During that time, I was working part-time at a local Boys and Girls Club, but I mean, it's nonprofit. I'm not making that much, right? And so that whole time I was just kind of trying to figure out, okay, well, what seems to be interesting based on the interviews I'm going on, based on these companies that I've been applying for. I mean, I'm sure people in the chat and people who are watching, they know hundreds of applications. Maybe a handful might actually reach back out to you, and of that handful, you might get a couple interviews, right? So that was kind of the process that I went under, and I just kind of went to whatever company would accept me, and there was only one that actually offered me a position, and that was the job. That was the job in finance. So okay. I was in LA at that time. And that's when I moved to DC. So I ended up working for a company called Bernstein Private Wealth Management, which is a global asset company, essentially. And they have different offices in different parts of the US. But I told them I'm willing to relocate. Take me anywhere. Just give me the job, please.
So tell me this. Hold on. So how did you? So you're working at the Boys and Girls Club, and you're like, okay, well, I need to find any job, whatever job it is. Yeah. I'm just going to, if it comes up, because I'm doing thousands of resumes, thousands of applications. Nothing seems to be coming up. All of a sudden, you're applying to this place. Like, what did you apply for? Did you apply for a finance position? Did you know you had that skill set? Like, how did you end up in a financial and wealth management for a company all the way in DC?
So I was on Indeed, I was on LinkedIn, I was on all the, typical websites that you would go to and apply for positions. And this was more of like a operations sales based role. It was an associate. So the role itself was assisting financial advisors and helping them build their business, because that's essentially what you do in private wealth management. Financial advisors go out, they seek their clients, they try to build their portfolio, bring in more money, more assets under management. And as an associate, we help to manage all of that stuff. And we're more of the client-facing position. So that was the role itself. Within the role, there is some analytical, Monte Carlo simulation type stuff that we did that I just was not familiar with at that time. I had no background in training. As I mentioned before I even was hired, I didn't know what a stock and a bond was. Like, I knew nothing about the financial industry, like nothing. But because I interviewed well and because they saw the drive and the willingness of me to learn more, I think that's really what they wanted. They saw that hunger. And this role was it was an entry level role. So they weren't expecting me to have 2 to 3 years of experience already. They didn't, most people come straight out of college. So because of that, I think they were willing to take a chance on me. And I was definitely willing to take that job. So I was not complaining at all. And even it's funny because like the salary that I first got, that first role was higher than any other company back in Los Angeles and California, and it was higher than I was ever even expecting for my first position. And that wasn't even like a tech role. It wasn't really like a super analytical role. It was more of like a salesy operations role, really.
Yep.
So I was kind of shocked. For me, like I thought I was going to get like 40,000 and 50,000. I would have been fine with that, but it was definitely more than that as a first
Wow.
position, especially for someone who didn't have any experience in finance whatsoever. So I was definitely
Wow.
appreciative and grateful. I think my starting salary was like 60 some, I forget the exact number, but 60 something in that range.
Holy wow. So you graduated, you spent the whole 4 years of your life going to school in liberal arts and linguistics and so forth, and studying Arabic, traveled the world. And the roles that you weren't able to get a job. But
Yeah.
ultimately, what ended up happening is, you did some side jobs, boys and girls clubs and so forth, but you start applying to, you know, different industries. And the financial industry, they pay people damn well, even people coming out of college, right? And they
Yeah.
probably almost saw you like, okay, well, she has experience because of her background. You can obviously tell she's a people person based on amount of travel she's done and how she enjoys to help people. And they said, you know what, we're going to treat her like an entry level employee coming into the financial industry, and they paid you a shitload. They actually paid you more than a lot of engineers are paid. They're out of college a lot of the times. At least,
Really? Oh,
you know,
wow.
I was a
Yeah.
software engineer. Well, I'm older than you, well, obviously, but when I came out of college as a software engineer, I was making $48,000. If you're making $60,000 coming out of college, even still to this day, as a developer, that still is a good salary. I'm like, that's a
Wow.
good salary. So, um, financial markets, the financial industry, right? They do pay people pretty well. But talk about this, right? You got the job.
Hmm.
You said something that I want you to hit on. They saw your drive. They saw your how well you were able to interview. Like,
Hmm.
where does that stuff come from? Those are soft skills that are, I talk a lot about on this channel as well too.